Congratulations on taking the whole course. By now, you're a C Sharp guru, or something close anyway. So, this course was all about writing better code. The intention was to give you some better structures and object oriented patterns, and some tips on how to make your code more maintainable and more supportable. We also talked about code style, probably too long about code style, but hopefully you can go to your team and you guys can come to an agreement as to what style you want to use that's not too painful for all involved. Then we got into something a bit more interesting, some solid principles, which of course are some object oriented principles that you should be familiar with, but just kind of put in a different way, in a different perspective. And it gives you a nice quick checklist because there's only 5 principles involved. So you can kind of review your designs and take a look at that in terms of solid. We also gave you a number of general best practices over a number of topics, and we spent some time on exception handling, which no one really likes to talk about, but we talked about it. And then we discussed Lambda expressions and LINQ. And both of those are Microsoft technologies that are in common use these days, and you'll see them more and more as time goes by. Particularly if you're working in the web, you'll see that a lot in ASP.NET MVC patterns. And we also talked about async methods, which really take a lot of the pain of doing multi-threaded apps. Let's give you some resources to go even further. First of all, we have the book for solid principles, and the website and the initial paper. So these resources will give you even more information about object-oriented programming and good solid patterns. Microsoft, of course, has a lot of documentation, and they have their own coding conventions, a number of which we discussed. But if you need backup in order to support your team argument about how to do code style, you can use the Microsoft site for that kind of backup. More interestingly, Microsoft also has guidelines and best practices, and they have a lot of technical detail. For instance, when you're dealing with strings and how the inner workings of strings work and affect the efficiencies of strings. And they cover, of course, a tremendous amount of topics all across the framework. And then another resource you might be interested in is a classic book called Design Patterns: Elements of Reusable Object-Oriented Software. And it's not a .NET specific book. As you can see, it was written in 1995 before .NET even existed. But it's an object-oriented design pattern book, and it gives you a lot of nice little reusable patterns that you can use throughout your designs. There are 23 of those patterns, and they're really handy. A lot of things that you may be doing just by your own intuition, but this will give you some academic rigor to it, as well as give you some other ideas that you might not have thought of. We also, of course, have a video course in it, if you're interested in that. So those are some resources. Happy coding!